So you want to start a podcast for your business. I got some answers that might help you get off on the right track. Stick around, I'll share them with you, okay? Hey there, thanks so much for watching. My name is The Shaman, radio broadcaster, podcaster, and a podcast producer. And today we're talking all about how to start a podcast for your business. Now, up to this point, this channel has really helped out the hobbyist, but I have also gotten business owners, bloggers, brick-and-mortars, coming to this channel to see how they can build a podcast for their business. And I think this is wonderful. I think this is absolutely great because I believe every business, well, I shouldn't say every business, but I believe every serious business who is serious about getting more business, a podcast is definitely something that they should consider putting onto their website or becoming a part of their own marketing. Now, today what I want to talk about are a few things. I want to talk about you and your own personal business philosophy. Also, I want to talk about how podcasting can help strengthen your current assets that you already have in your business. And of course, I will share with you a couple of tips when it comes down to starting your own podcast. First, let's talk all about your philosophy and what your business philosophy is all about. How are you serving the world? And I'm sure you've heard this many times from other digital marketers out there. How are you serving the world? How are you giving that value out there? Because we all know that the value that you give to the world is what you get back in return. So how much you give, and if you're giving incredible value and tons of it, you're likely to get that in return, whether that be in podcast downloads, whether that be in gaining new business, products and services, people buying those services. It's just phenomenal what podcasting can do for you and your business. I've seen this time and time again with the businesses that I am working with and the podcasts that I am building out for them. They tend to see that they are getting some type of return on their investment of creating a podcast. So that's what I want to share with you. I want to see how much value you are sharing with that audience. When you share that value out, of course, this is giving your audience a peek into your own philosophy and into your own business. So if you're sharing tips and tricks, say in photography, but really your business is all about Photoshop, and you have a product that is all based around Photoshop, but you're talking about editing photos, within Photoshop, this is a great opportunity for you to share all of those tips and tricks. There are plenty of bloggers and video bloggers out there that are already doing this, and there's no reason why you and your secret sauce can't be on a podcast. Next, podcasting allows you to strengthen your authority and build your influence. If you do podcasting the right way, and let's be honest, there's no real right way to do podcasting, but I do encourage following a certain format of podcasting if you're doing one for business. Then what you're doing is you're building this grand authority within your category or your niche. And what you'll hear this many times. Of course, business owners will always tell you that you need to focus on the niche because that's where people are really looking for that information. And it's true because when I have ventured outside of my niche, I didn't get the results that I wanted. But when I focused on one particular niche, in my case, podcasting, I am now getting people who are looking to get podcasting help, and you have to decide and figure out what your niche is going to be. Try to hyper target that niche so that you can get quality listeners versus a ton of listeners. There's a big difference in having hundreds of thousands of people versus having a tight-knit group of individuals who come back and listen to your podcast. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that you shouldn't have thousands and thousands of listeners, but it's always better to have those core audience members who are really willing to support you in your podcast because they will spread the word out about you. And of course, if you build a podcast for your business, this is a great way to generate leads, whether it be email leads, whether it be phone call leads that you're getting into your office. I've seen this happen before where your podcast is out there into the internet and people are calling offices and saying, I listened to your podcast and the tips that you share are incredibly great. How can I become a client? So your podcast can definitely be a lead generator. Doesn't mean that you are going to get 1,000 leads right at once. No, it's just another means or another opportunity for you to get more business into the door. So as a business owner, maybe even a blogger, you might ask yourself, well, what do I talk about? Like, what are the things that I can talk about? Now, as you heard me mention that I talk about a specific niche. And of course, within my niche, I can talk about podcasting, I could talk about hosting, I could talk about equipment, but I can also venture out into different areas such as this video and talking about starting a podcast for your business. I could also talk about creating YouTube videos for your podcast. And that's a whole other topic that we could talk about at another time. But there is a specific niche that I can talk about and branch away from within my niche. I like to think of it this way. If you have ever been in front of a potential new client or maybe a colleague and you have been talking about a particular topic within your industry, and that conversation just goes on and on and on, you have this really stimulating conversation, you might think to yourself, wow, that could be a podcast. I could have shared those 5 tips in a podcast that it could have lasted 30 minutes. That's how you structure out the topics of your podcast for distribution. So what I encourage you to do is I want you to sit down and I want you to come up with 52 topics that you could talk about. That's one topic per week. That is a topic for every week of the year. And this way you can get started on developing these programs over time. I have a really great video that talks about how to create podcasts that are in seasons. If you are a podcaster or a business owner that just doesn't really have all that much time, but I do have strategies and tips how you can keep the podcast train rolling without feeling burnt out. But think about 52 topics that you can talk about on a podcast that could easily be blog posts. And I've got some tips, if you stay with this video, on how to create those podcasts into actual blog posts. So think about who you can interview for your podcast. They are industry professionals. They are industry authorities. They are people that you can showcase who maybe have a product or a service that really ties well with your product or service. And all this does is help build your circle of influence and authority in the podcasting space. So it's always good to have an interview where you are interviewing someone else and helping build your own authority and showcase someone else so that you can help build their authority as well. And in return, your audience is getting all this amazing listening value that they can always come back to and check out again. Now, first you might ask yourself, well, which equipment do I need? Now, you could do podcasting on the cheap, or you can do podcasting that is going to cost some money, but it's equipment that you will only need to buy once. And as a business owner, I believe that if you're trying to become the best in your area, you need to get at least equipment that is going to make your podcast sound stellar, okay? So I have a video right here that you can go ahead and check out on my basic podcast setup. Also, I have a link down below for a quick start guide on which podcast equipment that you can get for your podcast, so you might want to check that out. So it really boils down to your objective on how you want to create your podcast and how well and how great of a sound you want your podcast to be. You have to decide, how serious am I going to be about this whole podcasting thing? Because if I want to be the best, I need to have the best equipment that will get me to the goal of, getting more leads or pulling in more business or being able to go speak at a conference. You have to start thinking about those things and the investment that it's going to take to start your podcast. Now, one of the things that I talk about when it came to creating podcasts is that you could double up the content. Not everyone has time to read a blog post, so if you're blogging, it can be very cumbersome at times, and I understand that. I'm not exactly the fastest typer anymore. I used to be really fast back in my younger age, but I do know that I speak a lot faster and the thoughts just come out a lot easier for me. And if you have a podcast where you are interviewing someone and you're giving out tips, you can easily turn that podcast into a blog post. And here's a good tip that you can use. There are transcription services out there like rev.com where you can get your podcast for your business transcribed and put onto your blog. And in turn, this is really great benefit for the search engine optimization when people are looking for certain keyword terms in your industry or niche. You will utilize, hopefully, if you have an email list, you will utilize that list and drive traffic to that particular blog post and page that also has the podcast listed on it as well, and that gets eyes onto your brand. And hopefully, your listeners will be able to share out your podcast and be a voice for you. So that's just something to think about. And lastly, there are opportunities to monetize on a podcast if you want to. Are there great, huge sums of money that will give you the opportunity to retire by doing a podcast? Not likely, but they are opportunities, and these opportunities can come in the form of sponsorships. They can come in the form of affiliate programs, the products and the services that you're utilizing for your own business. Those are just some things that you can think about. I have a PDF in the description down below that you can download. Go ahead, and talks all about how you can monetize a podcast. And this is after years of being in the radio industry and learning all about the opportunities of how radio monetizes their platform. Now, if you're wondering how long should my podcast be for my business, I've got a video that is over here on your right-hand side that you can go ahead and check out. You can go ahead and click on that, and I'll give you some tips on how long your podcast actually should be for your business podcast. In the meantime, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, like this video, and of course, hit that little bell down below so that you can get notified every time I drop a brand new video, and leave comments. I do get back to them as soon as I can. Thanks for watching this week.